Hi, Grandma Abuela here. I'm just outside enjoying a beautiful autumn day in my backyard. If you can hear heavy breathing and running around in the background, those are my dogs. They're outside playing and enjoying it. My topic today is I want to talk about how important it is to take advantage of the opportunities you have to have those difficult conversations with your kids. And by difficult conversations, I'm talking about things like, the birds and the bees. Those conversations about sex, birth control, what happens if a child does happen to get pregnant or get a girl pregnant. Those kinds of conversations, they're tough conversations. We've all seen those silly sitcoms where the dad sits the kids down and says, "Okay, kids, today we're going to talk about something. Now, when you have a man and you have a woman," and it's always hilarious in the sitcoms, and the kids sit there and they squirm uncomfortably. And let me tell you, in real life, I imagine that kids would squirm pretty uncomfortably because that's just not something that you want to sit down with your parents and have. That's just not the kind of conversation you want. But there are times and events that occur which can make it so those conversations can happen naturally. Now, just a kind of funny story, if you saw one of my earlier videos where I had written on the whiteboard in my house the pros and cons of having a puppy and the pros and cons of having a baby. And that was, just kind of a fun way to talk about, whether or not it's logical to have a puppy or a baby. And I left those lists on my board, didn't think anything more about it when I finished up with the video. And went about my day, and my daughter, who's 17, and she's my youngest, she came home from school and she happened to glance over on the whiteboard and she saw that I had this list, and I'm talking about the pros and cons of having a puppy, which we have. Her puppy is now about 6 months old, and then the pros and cons of having a baby, and she can see that the lists are the same, and she's very well aware that her puppy has destroyed a lot of things. Her puppy's destroyed shoes, the puppy's put holes in the carpet, the puppy's made huge messes, the puppy's expensive. So she recognized that list as being very valid for the puppy. And then here she sees this list about the pros and cons of whether or not to have a baby. And she was a little bit concerned because, we'd gone over pros and cons with having a puppy, and I let her get a puppy. And so now all of a sudden, here's this list about a baby. And she comes to me and she says, "Mom, what's going on? Are you thinking about having a baby?" And she was really, a little concerned, maybe even a little bit upset. I'm a single mom, don't have a boyfriend or anything. And I said, "Oh no," and I started laughing about it. And she says, "Well, I just want you to know that I am not okay with you having a baby at this point." And I'm like, "Really? Why not?" And she says, "I do not want to have a little brother or a little sister who is actually way younger than my nieces and nephews." And she makes a valid point, because my oldest granddaughter is actually old enough to babysit now, so that would be just a little bit weird, but it could happen. Anyways, it opened up a door for us to have a great talk about birth control and about what would happen if she were to get pregnant at this point in time in her life, and what would she do, and what would be the best course of action for her life and for the life of this unborn child, which, she's not pregnant, but, what would be the best course of action, and what should teenagers do, and how do you make this kind of a decision, and how do these kinds of things happen, and about birth control. And it turned out to be a really, really good conversation. Later on, that evening, I realized that even though we'd had this great conversation, I had never actually answered her question about why I had this list on the board, so she still didn't know whether or not I personally was pregnant or thinking about having a baby. So I went to her room and I talked to her, and I said, "Oh, by the way, about that list, I never did clarify why that was there," and I explained to her it was just for one of my parenting videos, and she was visibly relieved. There have been other opportunities when I've been able to have discussions like this with my kids. That's not the only time I've ever discussed this with my daughter. And that's one thing I think you need to understand, is it's not a one and done type proposition. It's kind of like exercise. You don't exercise one time and you're like, "Okay, great, I'm fit. I never need to..." Sorry, that was a motorcycle going past outside my yard. You don't just exercise one time and think, "Okay, great, now I'm fit. I don't need to ever exercise again. I wish it were that easy." but it's not. And it's the same with raising kids, with instilling those values, whatever your values are about, you know, pregnancy, sex, all of those kinds of things. You have values and you have things that you want to teach your kids about. You cannot just think, well, I'll have that one conversation like they do in the sitcoms and then we're done. That's not how it works. You have to have many conversations over the years, and you have to keep those conversations age appropriate. So that's not the first time I've had this type of conversation with my daughter. There's been times when maybe we'd be watching a television show together, and we like to watch TV together. And I know there's a lot of people who say don't watch TV. Well, I like to watch TV. I like to watch it with my daughter. And so we'll watch TV, and we will watch those shows where things happen, like maybe one of the characters gets pregnant. Maybe somebody gets raped. Maybe someone has unprotected sex, or sex that they don't feel ready for, or whatever the topic is, whatever that TV show happens to be. And sometimes we'll pause the show and we'll talk about it right there and then. I'll say, wow, I don't know if I like that character's decision. What do you think? Do you think she made a good decision? Do you think he made a good decision? And she'll tell me yes or no, and she'll tell me her thoughts, and we'll discuss it. And it just makes a great platform. We've done it when we've been reading books. We've have a very good relationship, and so sometimes she'll come and she'll tell me, hey, I found out that so-and-so and did such and such, and I'll say, well, what do you think about that? Do you think that was smart? And I don't say it judgmentally. The way I say that right now, like, do you think that was smart? That sounds like I'm being judgmental, and that's not how the conversation is at all. It's more like, wow, what are your thoughts about that? Or how do you think she feels about that? How do you think he feels about that? We just have a really good relationship, and we have a good open discussion, and she's able to tell me her thoughts. And I think that her ability to tell me her thoughts is one of the most important things of this whole thing of parenting. I think that the reason why we have this type of relationship, and I need to give you a little warning here, I live in a train town and I can hear that a train's coming, so I'll try to hurry and end this. I think one of the most important things is that she knows she can express her opinions to me, and I'm not going to get upset, I'm not going to yell, I'm not going to tell her she's stupid or that she's crazy or anything like that. I am going to respect her thoughts and feelings, and I think that is huge to having a good relationship and being able to have those hard conversations with your kids.